we're juggling. We're constantly juggling different things. Family, our own personal stresses, the stress and work of others when we're working with other people. You're carrying a lot and you're literally juggling balls in the air. Some of the balls are glass, some of them are rubber. Right? And so the ones that I would say are static are my glass balls, my relationship with my spouse, my relationship with my kids.
I use that wheel of life idea too, but I actually really love this idea of these are glass and they're to be protected and they're precious. Good morning, Janan. I appreciate you being here with me, and I can't wait for the listeners of this podcast to meet you and know how we met, how we know each other, and mostly to talk about you and your journey. So that's really what this is about. So you and I have known each other for a few years. We know each other through Medipreneurs.
Yes.
We're fellow pharmacists. I know your work from APHA and admired that from afar. Like, how do you learn to write books and publish and edit? So we know each other in all sorts of ways. But what we haven't done is spend a lot of time unraveling each other's lives and what does the day-to-day look like. So how do you introduce yourself to people? Let's just start there.
Sure. Yes. Thank you so much for having me and for having this conversation. I am Janan Sarwar. I call myself a pharmacist, publisher, or publishing professional. That's important to me. I'm also a mother, and having that aspect of being a mother and being able to balance work, life, and all that comes in between. That's part of what I do. And then as far as pharmacists are concerned, I do also do career coaching to advise individuals who have been in the pharmacy profession, chose this career path, and are curious about, is there more to this profession that I chose? Is there more I can do? Is there more I can give back? And helping them navigate and find out what that is. I do that through the Happy PharmD.
Yeah, and that's how you and I originally know each other too, is through the Happy PharmD and that career coaching. And then I spent some time in your RX author group because I have a book in me. So at some point, you and I are going to work together on that, and that will be part of the story too, but it isn't yet. So what I know, we've had recent conversation about this idea of how you take care of your well-being in the midst of mothering and in the midst of this big career where you work with entrepreneurs and professionals. So let's just dive into that. What does well-being mean to you? What does it look like?
To me, well-being is looking at my life as a whole and finding the different aspects of my life that are important to me. So it's always important for a section of that pie. And I can even visualize it in a circle. Maybe you've heard of the Wheel of Life, or just a way to kind of really look at your life holistically. And so I try to do that, divide my life into the 8 most important areas that I'm focusing on right now, what's important to me, and kind of rating myself on where I am in each of those. And so when I decide, the first element, the first layer of figuring out what well-being is, for me, is looking at what is important. What do I think is important? And sometimes you think something's important, such as sleep. Sleep is a component of well-being for me. Mental health, my time for myself, time with my family, and then, of course, all the career-related aspirations that I have, goals that I have, and actual tasks that I have. So, for example, putting out different books, publishing books as a book publisher for Global Bookshelves, actually working on projects, acquiring new projects with individuals, talking to them about if they have a book within them, or for the books that I have existing. Each of these take mental energy, take mental time away from other things if you don't balance it. And so to me, well-being is looking at everything as a whole, seeing if that I have a balance, and how I do that is actually being honest with myself and rating, okay, on a scale of 0 to 10 on this area, this segment of my life. If I'm saying sleep, I look at where I am today and I consider the last few weeks and give myself a score. Have I been sleeping enough recently? If I haven't, then I give myself a lower score. Maybe I can say that it's not perfect. It's not, I optimally want this much sleep. So if I'm getting half the amount of sleep than I should, then I'll give myself that score of that 5 out of 10. And what that does, it does hurt a little bit at first to look and be honest with myself, but then it's rating every other segment of my wheel and then saying, okay, this is where I am right now. This is the reality of what life is right now. What do I need to do to make it one step higher tomorrow or for the next week? And I actually do self-evaluate quite regularly, at least once a week, on certain areas that I'm focusing on. And then sometimes what I do is I switch out segments of the pie. Things that are really high that I'm like, it's kind of on autopilot. It's important to me, but it's doing well, but I need to focus more on something else. I actually put it in my face, remind myself, give myself a score, and then strive to do a little better.
Yeah, I really appreciate that system that you're using, because it sounds like the regularity of looking at it is what's keeping you on track or feeling the sense of balance.
Yes.
And so I'm curious, the 8 areas that you mentioned, are those static throughout a year, or do they change?
I have a few that are core, that are very important to me that aren't changing, but some of them that, if I'm realizing something's lacking or something's doing really, really well, that's the whole, because the idea is we're juggling. We're constantly juggling different things, family, our own personal stresses, the stress and work of others when we're working with other people. You're carrying a lot and you're literally juggling balls in the air. Some of the balls are glass, some of them are rubber. Right. And so the ones that I would say are static are my glass balls. That if something were to happen, my relationship with my spouse, my relationship with my kids, if that gets too low for too long, I mean, it's at risk of breaking. And so those are the ones I would say the core things, my mental health, my mental, stability, that's really important. And sometimes we are so focused on our other outward goals or other dreams that we don't even evaluate or check in with ourselves, with myself. And recently going to a mindfulness retreat with you was really a perfect time for me to really take time to think about myself. I was telling the other women that were at that retreat, this is the longest time period that I have just thought about my own self, where things are for me at one time. And I think it was beautiful because it has forced me to make that more of a regular practice for me to think about myself, because it's important, as maybe you've heard others say, you can't pour from an empty cup. If we're going to be doing all of these other things for so many other people, if we're not 100% there, it's not going to be successful. So to answer your question, I would say of my areas, there are 4 that are always there. And that relates to my spiritual health, my mental health, my family, and then my personal relationships, connections with others. Those stay because it's really easy to get caught up in the other things that you just forget. So those stay for me. And then the other ones that are career related, I do go in and out of what I keep on the list, what I'm focusing on. And maybe sometimes I accomplish a goal, so I don't have to keep that on my radar.
Yeah, I thank you for clarifying that. And so it's almost like some concentric circles. So I use that wheel of life idea too, but I actually really love this idea of these are glass, and they're to be protected, and they're precious in a way. And so those are the core ones that I pay attention to. And thank you for acknowledging the retreat. I was so happy to have you there. It was pretty spectacular to have that time to focus with one another. And I'm curious, since you mentioned it, what are you doing now that you weren't doing prior to the retreat that's related to your well-being?
Yeah, the breathing exercises. I'm aware of breathing exercises. I'm aware of the importance. I also do Taekwondo with my family and my children. They're involved in it, but and there are breathing practices associated with that during the time, but to actually take time when I feel stressed. And something beautiful that I learned from you was this and maybe you can describe it more in detail, the vagus response and just the balance between good stress and bad stress, and how we need to have, like, when we're optimally working. I thought it was just really beautiful. You shared a handout with a visualization that I really loved. If you don't mind telling the audience more about that. I thought it was really interesting and intriguing, and a way to think differently. And how do I react in certain situations? How much stress is good for me to get me to act? And then when do I go into inaction? And one of the things we discovered when I was talking and sharing about what I do in times of stress is I procrastinate, or I'll clean the entire house. I'll organize spaces, which is helpful in a way to declutter my mind and declutter other things that are going on. But otherwise, it's sometimes a way of procrastinating too.
Yeah, so we talked about polyvagal theory, and that movement, that pendulum swing between fight or flight and off. And so sometimes we think we're supposed to be off. And what there's this really optimal place where we can swing between production and rest instead of full tilt, crazy stress and off. So that was one of the things that we shared visually, was that pendulum. And then the other one was really more about just the kind of the hormonal response to stress throughout the day. And so we're in this, I call it the cortisol suit. So this total stress response, and then we do more and more and more and more and more to try to get out of it. And we're actually activating more of the stress. And so sometimes that cleaning that you mentioned is probably that. Like, right. I've got to take some action because I know that I'm stressed. And sometimes that actually brings us back down, so when you're talking about decluttering in a healthy way, it brings us back down into a place of optimal balance and joy. And, now I know what to do. Now I can take the next action. And then sometimes it is procrastination. So it's really paying attention to what is the reason for this activity. And the breath is usually a place to go, what do I need? It's a good place to kind of the what is called for now question. Yeah, it's interesting. And I know that you've got 3 little ones.
Yes. And I apologize if their sound comes through. They're around.
Yeah, that's just fabulous. And if they come in, that's perfect. Because that's life, right? I mean, we're talking about well-being in the midst of life. And I know they're also part of the way that your business has evolved. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because you're impacting their well-being with your business, and I want to know more.
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much for asking. So my children are the inspiration for what I chose to do with my career. It is true. They're 3 girls. Their ages are 3, 5, and 7 now. So they're all in a school environment during the day. When we're in a break time today. But one of the things that was important for me was being present, because I was recognizing that I was working a lot. When I worked at APHA, I loved my job. I loved what I was doing. I was working and publishing books. I was a senior director of the books and digital publishing department. And at that point, I would say in my career, I'd worked at APHA for about 7 years, loved what I was doing and working with authors around the world in United States and publishing their books. So I'd published around 35 books, and just really interesting projects that I got to do. But I found myself, even when they were home, I was around. I worked from home, but I wasn't really present. And I didn't recognize that until my eldest daughter came and talked to me one day. I had to do something, I call it my second shift. After they'd come home from school, I'd be around mentally thinking about all the work projects and all the things that I had going on. And then after they'd go to bed, I'd go back to my computer. So there was one night in particular where I was starting to do my project, my night shift, as it will. And Leena, my eldest daughter, came in and said, Mom, it's ironic. And she was 5 years old at the time she said that. I thought, how does she know what that word means? And she said, yeah, you make books for work and you tell us to read books, but you don't have time to read one more bedtime story. You're always working. And really, that really impacted me, the fact that she recognized that. I thought I was getting away with it. I thought I'd figured it out, a way to balance. But when she said that to me, I recognized that, okay, maybe something needs to change with the way I spend my time. And I actually asked her that next day, what is it that she'd want to see happen? I thought she was going to say, Mom, don't work anymore, spend time with us. And she didn't say that. She actually said, Mom, I want to start a podcast with you. And I'm like, oh, what 5-year-old says that? And then it all makes sense, not just because of me and my spouse. My spouse also, he's a pharmacist and he works from home. But I recognize that children are the mirrors of what they see. Right. So what they saw, all my girls saw is a mom working on the computer. Like you can see little kids. I see other children sometimes mimicking their parents and they just have like a pretend and they're just like typing away, or they have a phone, or they're talking on the phone. So those are some of the things they saw. But they also saw me speaking on podcasts with really amazing people. They saw that. So Leena also, all three of them listened to podcasts, children's podcasts. So to her, it was natural to say, we should make one. And so I kind of dug deeper. At first, I kind of wanted to say, what are you talking about, a podcast? But then I said, all right, let me just go with this. What kind of podcast? She said, oh, it'll be like the ones that we listen to, the story ones. So there are storytelling podcasts where children, adults, they're just reading books. And so again, being in the publishing field, at APHA at the time, I said, well, it can't just pick books off the shelf that you like and read them because there's copyright rules. I was trying to explain that, but I said, all right, this is an interesting idea. And so that's what inspired something she created on her own. It's called Salaam Storytime. She named it. She created the cover. She created every element that it exists about it. And then we went to the library, talked to some librarians. They helped us find books that were copyright free. And as that has grown, this has been something that has inspired Salaam Storytime, which is this nonprofit, fun family initiative. All my girls, my spouse, my friends, people in the community that we know have been a part of it, either listening or participating with their voices. Since then, that inspired the production and starting Global Bookshelves International, which is my publishing company, where, again, inspired by Leena's idea of one specific thing that she said of how ours would be different. Because I said, how would our podcast be different than the other stories? She said, oh, it would be like books that we have on our shelves. And again, little did she know what she meant by that was I particularly curated and selected books from around the world on our bookshelves, because my friends come from different backgrounds and otherwise. So it was something that, she said, yeah, the stories that we hear, they're all the same. We should have some of our stories. And so now that's why one of the things that I do with Global Bookshelves International is help people that have voices or stories or perspectives that are underrepresented, things that you don't hear about every day and from a different perspective, and just help them publish that. So that's in the children's world, and my children are my editorial board for those projects, and then for memoirs and other books as well. So it's been a great balance of being able to take my passion, my creativity, my love of books, my love of reading, and marry it with something that helps my family, gives me time, and it's just truly what I love to do. And so I can be mindful of the projects that I accept, because it's not working for a corporation or somewhere there where I don't have as much control. And it's people that are really like wanting to work with me as well. That really inspires, the work that you can do. So yeah, thank you for letting me share that. I gave you a long-winded answer, but my children helped.
That's a fabulous answer. I mean, if I were having a visual, I would have my tail wagging, which is my response to things. Like if I were a dog, I would wag my tail, and that makes me so happy. So you honored her just really specific request to say, here's what looks like our family plan for well-being, and it's creativity. It sounds like that's like I would view that almost as a spiritual practice if I were looking at that through a well-being lens that I use. I think of creativity as spirit. How does that resonate with you?
Yeah, that's a beautiful word. I think in the idea of creativity, making things, being able to use your imagination. Like one of the things that I think is so important is helping children see where they thrive, see what
Mm,
is exciting for them. And so each of my daughters, as they discover themselves, as I discover how they interact with me, they bring something different to the table. And so being able to have more time to parent, to watch them grow, to incorporate them in what I do has just brought an element that I can't buy that. I can't go and
mhm,
find that. It's here. So it's capturing that creativity that you're talking about, being able
mhm.
to utilize it, and then thinking of it in terms of spirituality and just, that essence of being creative is really exciting because there's no limits. There are fewer rules, and
Mm.
it's this ability to just be. And yeah, it's really, really, really fascinating. So thank you for applying that word and helping me think even more creatively about creativity.
Yeah, yeah. It's so much fun to see that kind of revealed again because it gets buried under a lot of obligations sometimes. I'm curious. So there's this real sense of looking for voices that maybe weren't heard or or underrepresented. Have you always done that, or is that new for you?
I would say that that kind of has found me, or I've been attracted to that, or
Mhm.
vice versa. And the reason being is I am born and raised in Tennessee, Clarksville, Tennessee, small town. And I guess I'd often say, I found myself as the
Mm.
only, you name it, in a group, whether that was in school settings or growing up, the only woman that was in. At first, actually, believe it or not, I was in an engineering major, so I was of the few women in a in a certain sphere. And so being able to find my own voice and be able to share my opinion when I was of the lesser represented has been a theme, an ongoing theme,
Mm.
literally since I was in preschool or a small child. And recognizing that difference and also embracing it, and it took time. I would say it took me years to really recognize that being the only in a space is empowering because you have a different perspective.
Mhm.
And it really was, again, it's really easy to get in this, oh my gosh, I'm the only one that thinks this, or I'm the only one that feels this, I'm the only one seeing this from this perspective. It's easy to doubt yourself, but it was actually really inwardly looking. And then also, I would say mindfulness practices. And I really credit this to our mutual friend, Alex Barker, for
Mm.
helping me see that, because I would say I did feel a little lost. I was the only pharmacist that I knew for the longest time doing something that's so, I thought I was like, I thought I made a mistake. Like, oh my gosh, I took my pharmacy degree and then I went and worked at an association and I published books for all these years. Where else can I ever find a job? Where else can I, if I leave here, if I were to go anywhere else, what would I do? And I was speaking to Alex about that, I don't, and I actually met him. This is a story that not many people know, but I'm happy to share now. I met him originally as, his company is helping career coach others. I went just to have a
Mhm.
consultation to be a client, believe it or not, to
Right,
ask,
right.
well, okay, if I were to leave, what would I do? And he talked to me, and I'm not in front of my bookshelf that I normally have. I have a bookshelf that the top shelf is a lot of textbooks and the rest are colorful books. And he was like, "Is that a real bookshelf behind you?" And I said, "Yeah, that's real." And he said, "Tell me more. Why do you have all those books?" I said, "Well, number one, I like to read. And number two, that top shelf is full of books that I helped publish when I was at APHA." And he said, "Janan, how many pharmacists can say they've done that?" And I said, "I don't know, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the mistake I made and the career path that I chose, and I don't know what to do." And he said, "Look, it's an asset to be able
Mm,
to have this unique expertise And this experience, you can take that and transfer it into other things. So he helped me see parts of myself that I didn't recognize. And it was the mindfulness practices of just sitting down and thinking, okay, what do I love to do? What am I good at doing? How can I help others and support them with what I do? And what's the intersection of that? And, who would actually pay me for any of these services? And it's been this combination of really truly finding those areas, those elements of, okay, yeah, I love to help people tell their story. I love to help them recognize that, yeah, if you feel like you're that fish that's swimming the wrong way, like there's this school of fish going one way and you're going the other way, which I could really resonate with that. It's the one that swims the other way that gets noticed. It's the one if you're going with the school, you're going with the school. Maybe that's the way you're supposed to go. But if you're going the other way, there's a reason. There's some conviction that's happening when there's that fish that is going the other way. Why are they going that other way? And then, that's inspiring. And being able to inspire, just someone else seeing that within me, that like, Janan, you really followed this, the things that you loved. And there's a way to marry that into all the things that you can offer the world. And so I'm an entrepreneur now, I guess I would say. And it has its own challenges and opportunities, but I would say I'm the most at peace that I've been in years. And the new elements of stress that are in my life are parents that are aging, or when children get sick, or when children face things in school as they grow older. The elements, these won't go away, right? But being able to have the time and space to manage it. I think before I was on autopilot, just go, 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 get this career, follow that, and make this milestone. But now I have more time, and I'm really appreciative of that.
Oh, I love that analogy so much, because I've often been the fish going the other direction, going, I don't know where this is leading, but I'm just going with it to see how it feels. So tell me about this new venture where you have this time and space. You've got kids, you've got parents. How do you know when you're off your well-being plan? What are your markers? You mentioned mindfulness, but what else?
Yes. So my markers are specifically just motivation, lack of motivation to do something. That's the greatest concern I have when, I'm in a space where I can be creative and have fun. But if I feel that resistance or the procrastination coming in, I see myself thinking of how I can reinvent spaces and organize. That's a clue for me that I need to level set or refresh my intention of, what is this project? Why am I doing it? How is this going to help me in my business or help my client or whomever? So when I sense that feeling of I'm putting something off, it's really that procrastination. It's really great. And I've really learned this a lot from you too, as of late, to just take a pause and take a break, and being okay with saying that, what, I can just take this time, breathe, think about it, journal about like, what is my feeling right now? And what do I need? What are the elements that I need to proceed? Sometimes it's that, there are so many steps to a process that things can feel overwhelming when, you're like, okay, I have to go from A to Z, and you're just seeing A to Z, and, all those, there's a lot of steps in between. But sometimes for me, just writing it out, okay, and then being able to cross off items off the list and slowly making progress over perfection. That's one of my favorite statements. Progress.
Yes, and thank you for that journal. I am right. I am noticing that all the time. Because for I think all of us that were educated in the sciences, there is that we're trained toward perfection.
Yes.
It's interesting. And so letting go of that a little bit, letting go of the grip, and what is the progress that I'm making, just that mindfulness of the progress, it sounds like, is part of it.
Absolutely.
So I want to know, so if you're working with someone who is moving from let's say a safe pharmacy job into an entrepreneurial path, how do you advise them to have this time and space for themselves?
Yeah, that's a really great question because that can be something that maybe someone's unprepared for, going from that world, right, of being it's almost like when you're in school, you have a structure, you have these
Mhm.
expectations, you have someone overseeing you, you have so much, and then the freedom can be overwhelming too.
Uh-huh.
And so I think it's really just what are the checkpoints personal checkpoints that you have, milestones that you have, because, where I think it is really important to have a structure to your day,
Mhm.
to still, like previously, if you were working in an environment where you were going somewhere, getting up and getting ready, continuing that. Even as an entrepreneur, making sure you have those routines, making sure you have, a schedule where you're eating properly. Because again, when you're so excited and happy to work, you can forget those elements of, self-care or eating and drinking. And then before you know it, like that, these are those little things that, if we talk about that wheel of life again,
Mhm.
as they deplete and you're not noticing it, or even if you do notice it, let's say you're running on empty on your self-care, it spills over to the rest. And it impacts and blocks the creativity, the productivity. And so that is the biggest the area of risk of, you're going from a very, you know, a, a certain world that you're maybe some people are burned out. I think that's a lot of the clients that I see in the Happy Farm D, where they're coming to us where they're like, I have been, maybe especially those that are in community retail pharmacy, that say, there's more to a career, there's more to life. I feel like a robot. I'm going in, and maybe they don't even have self-care right now because they can't take breaks and all of that. Then some that I've worked with that, took that time to take a break from work to actually find another job, and they've been successful. But that shock, that culture shock of, I'm going every day to work, and because and maybe this the cortisol soup. They were living in the
Mhm.
cortisol soup that
Right,
you
exactly.
described. And then when you're out of it and you can breathe, it's almost kind of scary and overwhelming. And you can't.
Mhm.
It's a different kind of, too much oxygen. I don't know. So I think my biggest advice is just, mentally being able to prepare and having people that you can speak with, and, just practices where you recognize, okay, I need to check in with myself and see what is going well, what areas that I'm not focused on, and then just kind of keep it even as possible.
Yeah, yeah, and there's this bit that I work with people too, and I'm sure you have
Yeah.
conversations that you're not going to get a 10 in every
No,
area every day,
no.
and actually that's part of the burnout.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah, and so letting go of the perfection, that's the piece that I tend to unravel
absolutely.
that part. Like you can't run 100 miles an hour down the interstate and fit yourself around the edges.
No.
That's when the burnout happens. Um,
Right.
yeah.
Absolutely. And if it is like 100%, when I see that as someone's like, I'm doing perfectly here and perfectly there, then I kind of say, all right, so is there something that, in order to get this other element a little higher, can we, not focus on the thing that you're at 100% so that you
Mhm.
can be, again, a lot of people that we're speaking with are pharmacists. We're about perfection. We want to be at the very, very top. So how can we settle with a B or a C? Less of a percent. It's because it's about balance, right? It's about a circle. And what we're hearing is, if you're 10 out of 10 in certain areas, a wheel, in order to keep moving in motion, if you're 10 and then, somewhere else, some of the other areas you're extremely low, that's not going to turn smoothly.
Right.
That's the mental visual that I think would be really helpful. I think you're doing a beautiful, beautiful work yourself. And I'm, if you don't mind, I'm curious because, when you said you're like me in the fish swimming the other way, when I recognize, because I've always known you from the mindfulness aspect, this beautiful, this perspective. And then when I heard that you teach nuclear pharmacy at university, I wanted to know, how does that clash in any way? Or how do you combine these two different sides of you? Because it's similar to me of like, the right brain, left brain, the creative side, but then also being able to produce results and being, goal oriented, and then, yet also free flowing creative. So how does that balance for you too?
Yeah, it's an interesting, and I do view it when you said the fish swimming the other direction. It's like I've always swam in a different direction, and nuclear pharmacy is part of that different direction.
Yeah.
Because I loved it was the visual side that attracted me to the imaging pieces of what's going on inside the body. I just thought that was so interesting. And so that's what brought me into that field. And now I really view it more along the lines of what you're doing in career coaching, is that I help connect students to whatever that passion is. Some of them love nuclear pharmacy. Some of them are just attracted to something that's different than the school of fish swimming in a direction that they don't quite feel like they fit into.
Right.
And so I just use it as another vehicle now to help people find their place.
That's beautiful.
It's interesting because it's evolved for me. When I was younger and really in the thick of that career, kind of like you're mentioning with publishing, nuclear pharmacy was my world. And now I just see it as one piece of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think it's kind of a similar thing to what you're talking about. But the thing that's been interesting for me, coming from this nuclear pharmacy background, is because it's such a specific lifestyle in terms of the hours that you work and the type of work that you do. I came to these mindfulness and movement practices really to protect my own well-being. So it's partially the reason that I have the practices, so that I can manage the stress that comes from not sleeping, the stress that comes from eating at weird times or working shift work. I had to learn some things really early in my career so that I could be okay, because of the strangeness of those shifts that we work in the field. So I think that's part of the story too. And just coming to what are some stress resilience practices that I can put into my life. So one of the things that you mentioned, it's not unlike being an entrepreneur in a lot of ways, because you work at night, and then during the day you have this time and what do you do with it? Because sometimes you sleep, and then sometimes you create new recipes. Sometimes you paint your house. Sometimes you take a coaching program or learn to play golf, because you have this weird time during the day when you're not sleeping and before you go to sleep that you can do real life stuff. It's a very interesting field. And so you can tell a story that it's going to ruin your body and your life, or you can create opportunity from it.
Yes. The mindset, right? The perspective of how we perceive things, right? There's so many ways to see that. This goes back to storytelling, right? There are different ways to tell a story, and there are different ways to create our narratives that can either uplift us or take us into a place that everything's negative, everything's doom, and that either one, you have the power to choose. And the biggest, I love that phrase that you reshared as well, that progress over perfection. Mm-hmm. How are we comparing ourselves to our past self? And, it's about making some sort of progress. You can find yourself, it can be discouraging if you look at your own self and things have shifted to not as progression, there. However, you have to also look at that holistically and say, okay, yes, this went here, this productivity or whatever, this about me is not as high as it used to be. But then comparatively, here's what I've accomplished somewhere else. And just being able to be your own kind of cheerleader and be someone that can see yourself in different perspectives. That it's only when you do that self-reflection that we've been talking about. Yeah. And it's so important, because otherwise when we just keep going on autopilot or keep just going, you can burn out easily. So
yeah, and it's so true, and I really appreciate the conversation. I know that the folks listening are going to love the highly visual languaging that you use. That's what. So I'm very visually oriented, and I so appreciate, like, oh, if I've got a rock in my tire, it's not going to roll, or
right.
I'm the fish swimming in the other direction, or I may be the only, and that may be empowering if I change my narrative. There's some
Yes.
real nuggets in here that I think are really helpful. And I appreciate I can't wait to journal about ooh, here's a beautiful story I can tell with this picture. So tell all of us, what's next for you in 2023 that you're most excited about from your own well-being, this creative process? What's coming up?
So just the opportunity to connect with people that are embracing this idea of, you know what, I should speak up about my perspective or unique
Mhm.
perspective that I have. And working with those, there's a series of videos that I started to create with a student pharmacist. Her name is Morgan Jones, and I found her through a rotation that a colleague of mine was leading, and it was about healthcare or bias in hiring practices. And so we worked
Mhm.
together to do this just fun video series about healthcare bias, specifically defining different bias types. And since I produced that, other students have approached me saying, oh, this is really interesting. I want to learn more. I want to do more. Other pharmacists that I know are, curious. And my dream is to find a way that I can, I love to write. So I'm searching for grant opportunities to be
Mhm.
able to bring to life in a creative way, whether it's a video series or I don't know, I'm very hopeful. I'm thinking putting it and saying it out there, saying it to the
Yeah.
world might help this happen even more. But yeah, I'm really interested in finding ways to get our voices and stories out there that relate to true issues. That if
Mhm.
someone, the goal of the series that the student pharmacist and I created was if this can help one person think a little differently in how they take care of their patients. Because just
Mhm.
really quick to share, we're taught to use our best clinical judgment, right? And sometimes we go to school in these different areas that don't get to actually see patients from different diverse backgrounds, whether
Mhm.
that's related to their health, unique abilities, their culture, their religion, age. There's so many people that it's impossible to learn it all in school. And so when you are faced with something that's new and challenging and you bring a bias with you, or you use a judgment and you don't have the best clinical judgment, it's these biases that we have, and we all have to have biases. It's kind of like the stress that you were talking about. We have to
Mhm.
have a little stress in order to go forward. You have a bias. Everyone has biases in themselves because that's how we make judgments and decisions in the world of what to do and what not to do. But sometimes it can really impact patient care. And so
Mhm.
I'm just really excited about this concept because several of the books that I'm publishing for others relate to this concept of health inequity, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And yeah, so that's what's majorly I'm very, very excited about. It's a passion project, but I thought I'd share in case anyone listening is like, oh, that's something I'd like to do or like to learn more about.
Oh
So
yeah, me too. And we'll be having some follow-up conversation. That is fascinating. Thank you for sharing that.
yeah,
So I know, so that passion project, and then I know that you like to connect with people who wish to publish. Who are
yes,
your
yes.
ideal people that wish to publish?
Ideally, it's if you have a story that you want to share that and you're wondering, does it make sense to publish as a book? Sometimes it's not even a book. Maybe you need to create a blog, or maybe you need to
Mhm.
start posting articles or publish in any way. I have this experience in publishing, whether it's for the general public or for publishing for scientific articles or a place like APHA. So I support anyone that has a story, has something that specifically ideally, if it relates to that diversity, equity, and
Mhm.
inclusion aspect that can promote that, that's who I'm looking for. So I'd love to work with anyone. My website for that is globalbookshelves.com, and just excited to see what people and what people I interact with next year, what books we produce, and how it impacts. Because one of the quotes that's my favorite, I'll share as well, is, a book may be out of 100 people, it might be for that one person, and 99 people might not understand, but it can change that life for that one person and give a new window of perspective to 99 others that they didn't have before. And so if there's a way to make that impact, that's just joy for me.
It absolutely shows. And you're definitely walking your path that you're meant to walk. And I am excited to be part of that journey. I could spend the rest of the day talking to you, to be honest, and alas, we must close. But how else can people find you? You mentioned your website, but where else can they connect with you?
LinkedIn is the best place. I'm the only Janan Sarwar there. So find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to support anyone who has questions related to their pharmacy career, related to writing, publishing, getting published. Just if I can support, I'm really happy to do so.
Thank you. And thank you, Janan, for just sharing your wisdom and your spirit and your heart with me and with the listeners. I will look forward to continuing this conversation. And you'll be hearing from me.
Absolutely. There's so many great collaborations to be made, and amazing people yourself. So all the women I connected with at your retreat, we're in touch in some way already, and will continue to be. You're so great at creating beautiful spaces and making that mindfulness and having that openness to discover about ourselves and what we can do with others. So I'm just excited to see what's next for you, and just so honored to be a guest of yours. So thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you. We will continue the conversation and the connection with the other amazing women. Yes. Thank you, Janan. So we'll talk soon, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.